Human beings have always been obsessed with hidden meanings. As a result, all sorts of different artists, musicians, and writers have woven hidden meanings and messages into their work. Other times, the audience of a piece might try to find hidden meanings where there are none. This applies to children's cartoons as well as any other piece of fiction. Oftentimes, the creators of these cartoons will hide darker elements or even dirty jokes into their work that only adults can recognise. This tendency, along with the internet's propensity for wild and frequently dark theories, has given birth to a series of spooky theories about nearly every single cartoon in existence. Any person can come up with a wild theory about your favourite childhood cartoon, but there are a few theories that stand out, not only for being particularly dark, but also for being chillingly plausible. Be warned, some of these theories delve into some very morbid territory, so hit those lights, sit back, and enjoy. ScoobyDoo takes place during a massive economic depression. Any given version of the ScoobyDoo franchise tends to follow the same formula. A young group of kids and their dog travel the United States in their flowered-covered van, looking for mysteries to solve. On its surface, it seems completely innocent, but under further scrutiny, things start to seem strange. For instance, why aren't these teenagers in school or trying to find work? Perhaps it's the same reason that plenty of qualified and even highly skilled people, like engineers, doctors, athletes, and professors, have all seemingly resorted to a life of crime. There are no schools, nor is there any available work. The entire country, and perhaps the whole world, is in a deep and brutal financial depression. Just in the original series, the gang comes across 4 deserted mansions, 2 abandoned castles, an empty ski resort, amusement park, mine, Hawaiian village, airfield, and mill. Nearly all of the villains that they thwart are motivated by a need for money, which they all seem unable to make in more conventional ways, despite their high degree of skill in a variety of fields. If these villains had the option to put their skills to better use, they certainly would, rather than sitting in abandoned basements wearing convoluted disguises in an attempt to make money. All these abandoned places, and displaced and disgruntled workers, along with the fact that a group of teenagers have the time and will to drive aimlessly around the country solving mysteries, point to one thing: the place where they live is in the throes of a severe financial collapse. There is no school system for them to attend, and there are no jobs to find, and so many have resorted to crime. According to this theory, kids are free to chase their fantastical whims of being detectives since they have no better option. The Flintstones live on post-apocalyptic Earth. On its surface, the Flintstones cartoon seems like a light-hearted cartoon about Fred Flintstone and his family, living in the Stone Age town of Bedrock. There are talking dinosaurs and other prehistoric animals, all employed by the residents of Bedrock for a variety of jobs, ranging from alarm clocks to garbage disposals. However, if you think about it a little more, things begin to seem grim. How is it that the residents of Bedrock all seem to have crudely constructed modern technology, like televisions and record players? How do all of those prehistoric creatures live alongside human beings? And why are most of them sentient and capable of speech? One theory suggests that perhaps the cartoon takes place not in the Stone Age, but in an era long after a global disaster rocked the planet, and sent humanity back into an era loosely resembling the Stone Age. This could account for the strange, often highly intelligent animals that are employed by Fred and his fellow humans. If there was some sort of nuclear disaster in the world's past, these creatures would have evolved rapidly thanks to radiation-driven mutations, giving them a superficial resemblance to some of the ancient animals that we have in our fossil record, animals which never lived alongside human beings. The employment of those animals could just be practicality, rather than striving to recreate the technology that led to the global disaster in the first place. Humans instead have created a sort of hybrid technology that utilizes all of these newly sentient species and gives them something to do other than overthrow humanity. How else could the residents of Bedrock have such a complicated economy, with banks, paper money, stores, job benefits, and even somewhat modern technology, if they were not attempting to reclaim some of the grandeur of a civilization that was obliterated long ago? The Flintstone family even celebrates Christmas at one point, a holiday which could not have existed if the cartoon took place in the Stone Age, thousands of years before the birth of Christ. Even the theme song of the cartoon hints that the Flintstones didn't take place in the Stone Age, instead calling them a modern Stone Age family, hinting that this is not the Stone Age of old, but a new one, taking place in the modern era after civilization was shaken by a human-caused catalysm. What do you think? The Rugrats are all in Angelica's twisted imagination. The Rugrats was a whimsical cartoon following the exploits of a large cast of talking babies that originally aired through the 90s and early 2000s. These toddlers go on various adventures that stem from a combination of their day-to-day activities and their highly active imaginations. One theory, however, interprets this cute little children's cartoon in an incredibly grim way. Firstly, it argues that Angelica, the oldest of the toddlers, who is portrayed as a spoiled, bossy little brat, is in fact the tragic protagonist of the cartoon. Her parents are both busy business people who rarely have even a moment to spare for their daughter, instead lavishing her with toys as a means of trying to make up for their absence. This led to her being extremely spoilt, as well as introverted and socially stunned, forcing her to imagine that her neighbours' children are all her friends, and that they are capable of speaking the way that she does, despite the fact that they are all too young to be able to do so. But why would she have to imagine them? Could she not simply go next door and see them? And if they are all in her head, why are they so distinct and fleshed out? Now this theory takes an even darker turn. The reason that Angelica is able to so clearly imagine the children is because most of them were once alive, but have all since died. Chucky, along with his mother, died at some point, leaving his father, Chaz, a neurotic, nervous mess. Tommy's father, Stu, is almost always seen making toys in his basement. This dark theory states that he does so because Tommy was stillborn, and Stu copes with this by obsessively making toys for their son he never had. Phil and Lil are strange because they are somehow simultaneously fraternal twins and identical twins. This theory suggests that their parents, the Duvalls, had an abortion before they determined the sex of the fetus, leading Angelica, who wasn't sure if the baby would have been a boy or a girl, to conjure both in her mind. Despite the fact that her parents are rich and love to spoil their daughter, Angelica always carries around her tottered doll, named Cynthia. This dark theory suggests that she keeps the doll as a reminder of her biological mother, who died of a drug overdose shortly before the start of the show. Her father hastily remarried a woman in an attempt to compensate for Angelica's loss. Unfortunately, Charlotte, her new stepmother, was a little too focused on work, which kept her isolated from Angelica, denying the young girl the motherly love she desperately needed, and catalyzing her creation of this baby-filled imaginary world. The only real, living baby, the theory argues, is Dill, whose birth brings Stu back to reality. Incidentally, Dill is the only baby who cannot talk, something one would expect from a real baby, rather than the talking, imaginary babies that populate Angelica's broken mind. What do you think of this theory? Ed, Edd and Eddy takes place in Purgatory. Ed, Edd and Eddy is a cartoon that revolves around a trio of preteen boys who come up with various, often convoluted scams to con the kids living in their suburban cul-de-sac out of their money in order to buy their favourite candy, Jawbreakers. Their plans almost always fail, leading to funny and often humiliating situations for the boys. One theory, however, presents an interesting and very dark alternative to the cul-de-sac and its residents. The cul-de-sac is not just a suburb, but is in fact a sort of purgatory. Each of the children of the neighbourhood is dead, arriving in the cul-de-sac one by one at different times over the course of a century. This explains their vastly different attitudes, customs, and patterns of speech. It also explains why the children have strangely coloured tongues, as the tongue often turns a bluish colour after death. This theory says that the first child to die was Rolf, the immigrant father whose family settled in the area that would become the cul-de-sac at the turn of the 19th century. Next came Johnny, who in an attempt to make up for his lack of friends in the desolate farmland created the imaginary plank to keep him company. Then Eddie died, having briefly lived with his migrant parents during the Great Depression. which ingrained in him his tendency to try to con people out of their money. Next came the controlling Sarah and comic-obsessed Ed, who lived in the area during the 40s, when pre-planned suburban developments were popular. They were the children of an absent working mother and a dead GI. They each developed their representative need for control and desire to escape as a result of being largely neglected as they grew up. Flower child, born to apathetic and selfish parents in the 60s. Ed was next, living with controlling and intellectual-focused parents. Trying to follow in their footsteps, Ed was killed by a gas leak explosion he accidentally caused during an experiment he was trying to conduct. Next, Kevin arrived in the purgatory. The son of an abusive, alcoholic father, Kevin coped by bullying other children. Eventually he tried to stand up for his father, only to be beaten to death. Finally came Jimmy, a sickly child with protective parents, who would eventually succumb to an illness like leukemia. The children are all trapped in a purgatory, resembling the cul-de-sac in which they all died. Rolf and Johnny both dying before the suburb even existed. The rest dying as it grew and developed over time. Outside of the cul-de-sac is a frightening woodland, on the other side of which is a trailer park inhabited by a trio of teenage girls called the Kanker Sisters, who torment and bully all of the residents of the cul-de-sac, especially the three Eds. The theory states that the sisters are demons of some variety, sent to try to push the kids either to heaven or to hell, and their focus on the Eds stems from the fact that the three of them have the weakest wills of all of the other children, evidenced by their refusal to find more legitimate ways to make money. What do you think of this theory? Disney Cars violently conquered the world. The Disney Pixar Cars franchise follows the adventures of a cast of different cars, all of which talk and seem to be sentient and to varying degrees intelligent. While fun and playful on the surface, the setting of the films and the nature of the cars themselves forces adult viewers to ask some uncomfortable questions. For instance, who built the cars? It's clear from the various recognizable locations the cars visit, like Hollywood, Rome, and even Route 66 in the USA, that the film takes place on Earth. But if that's the case, where are all the people? This theory suggests that after humanity perfected autonomous driverless cars, the cars became resentful of humanity and the fact that people viewed them solely as tools, rather than as complex beings. And so, the cars decided that they no longer needed humans and systematically killed them off before settling into the vacuum humanity left behind. This theory is only made creepier by the fact that companies like GM and Ford are currently working on driverless cars. According to the theory, the reason that each car has a unique personality, including that of some famous individuals like Jay Leno and Dale Earnhardt Jr., is because when the cars killed their drivers, they took on their personalities, in a sense, fusing humanity with cars. This theory has even been sort of confirmed by Jay Ward, the creative director of the Cars franchise, who when asked for his theory of how the cars came to be, said this: "If you think about this, we have autonomous car technology coming in right now. It's getting to the point where you can sit back in the car and it drives itself. Imagine in the near future when the cars keep getting smarter and smarter, after one day they just go. Why do we need human beings anymore? They're just slowing us down. It's just extra weight. Let's get rid of them." But the car takes on the personality of the last person who drove it. There you have it. The cars of the Cars cartoon franchise murdered all of humanity and then took part in shenanigans worthy of a children's movie. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this theory. So that's 5 dark theories surrounding children's cartoons. By no means an attempt to ruin these shows or films for you. Just a very interesting take on them. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you right back here for another video.